like to open it up now for any questions that anyone has. I've got a few questions of some of them, but I'd like to open it up if anybody's got any questions right now.
Who wants to start us off? There you
Here we
go.
go.
I can speak pretty loud.
All right, go for it.
So the question I've got is, and this is very speculative, but what would it have been like if Lincoln would not have been reelected? I mean, does anybody ever think about something like that? Stark, I know you probably do, but.
Try to answer.
McClellan says he's going to continue the war.
That's what he says.
But if you look at McClellan's record for not using troops, he's going to end the thing. It's a political promise to get elected, and then he's going to fold on it, I think. I think the war's over, and the South sues for peace, and it's ended. And there is a new country, the Confederate States of America.
I agree. I think the same thing would have happened. I think you would have had two countries, and who knows about possibly a third, because there are western states
Right,
that we're
exactly.
talking about. We're not connected to the east. The South's already done it.
Right.
What the heck? Let's make another third country
Right,
out
so
of
now
this.
you got Indiana and everybody else over
Yeah.
on that side.
So, yeah.
It's just an interesting prospect. What, we wouldn't be sitting here right now if that would have been the case.
I personally do not think we would have ever, because of the river of blood, that we would have ever gotten back together. I think that we would have cooperated in World War I, World War II. I think it would be like two separate countries. We would have still fought the Germans, but we would have been two separate nations. Who knows? Look at West Germany and East Germany. I thought after World War II, when I was over there, the Russians would never have let East and West Germany get back to the state. So who knows? I have a question for Stark that I've got to ask. You know, I would certainly argue that burning people's homes, businesses was a war crime under our present definition. Because what purpose did it serve, first of all? And second of all, what the real question I've got is at what level did somebody make the decision to burn all this stuff, or was this just Private Bafarsnik out there, half drunk, deciding to burn the courthouse in Oxford? Or at what level, who made the decision in the command structure? Was, the captain of the ship's Abraham Lincoln, but at the same time, was it the generals, the privates, who was doing it?
Please correct me if I'm wrong. There was a Lieber code written by a union lawyer, and they adopted that code, and it said you can't burn houses and universities and things like that, and it's totally disregarded. It's with Grant's okay. Lincoln had to know, there's no question about that, and Sherman seemed to enjoy it. As wrong as it can be, it would be a war crime today, yes.
Yeah, sure. I just wondered at what level, who made that decision to do that?
Lincoln knows. Lincoln knows it's going on. A lot of these are stragglers who do this stuff, but the commanding general's got to turn around and look at the back of the column and see the black smoke rising. He's got to see that. He's got to know it goes on.
Yeah.
There are a very few arrests I've seen for rape and murder, and a few for burning, but I can't find many. I have not looked through the Union JAG Corps. I've not looked for that. I've found a few.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have somebody do that. Somebody way brighter than I needs to go through and look at some of this in detail. Again, this is a side project for me. I'm hoping just to wake a few people up and have people come behind me. When I have tours with kids on, I'll say, please come finish my work.
If I could,
Who guarded the houses? You said the houses that were guarded were safe, but who guarded them?
In Oxford, for example, they went to Grant himself, and they said, would you send me some guards? They're harassing me night and day, and they're threatening to burn my house down. And Grant and other commanders would send guards. And these are usually the wealthy people in town.
I'd say this also falls under, in 1864, the hard hand of war. We know that Sherman is planning his march to the sea, and he wants to do what he wants to do there. And Grant has approved that. I don't think Grant was real thrilled with cutting off from supply lines, but he was willing to let him do that. He showed it could work at Meridian Expedition and earlier. And so I think Lincoln knew about it, Grant knew about it, and that's what Sherman wanted to do. There were times when the Army would move out and Sherman would say, supposedly, these aren't to be burned, but then you had those boys from Missouri in the back of the Army who were going through and we'll light it up anyway. So, but by then, Sherman is already with the rest of the troops moving out of the area, and then you look back and you see it, and it's too little too late.
Yeah, well, Sherman's quoted as saying he wanted to make Georgia howl, and he sure did.
Right.
Mike, let me ask you this. In your studies of the Civil War, and I know I've seen you with all the accoutrements and everything on, how much did the Southern infantrymen suffer toward the end of the war from privation, for lack of clothing, food, all that? I know food was a big problem the whole war, till they got to Gettysburg.
They suffered greatly. They marched. Recording Shelby Foote stated one time, he said a man asked him at a show, said, how did they do it? Said, how did a starving man march 20 miles, fight a 3-hour battle, and march 3 hours back? How do they do it? And he said he thought forever to try to figure it out, but when you're defending your house and home against an invader, you're going to do what it takes, and that's what they did. And I don't see how they did it, but they did it.
Well, you can get used to anything.
Yes, sir.
In Jackson's early campaigns that I've read on Bevan Alexander's books, a lot of these boys, we have this idea that all the Southerners were in great shape and they could hike, and that's not true.
They averaged, 125, 130 pounds apiece?
Right, and they were a lot of city boys that weren't used to the hiking all these distances, even some of the country boys.
They said some of those soldiers never left home. They had never been to more than 4 or 5 miles from home in their entire
Right,
life.
right.
But a lot of them sought adventure, and a lot of them went for various reasons. They said when the war started that, if you was an able-bodied man, the women of the town made you go.
Sure.
If you stayed at home, you wouldn't about to stay at home and take all that grief from the population.
Yeah.
So the men went to war, and the women were their biggest supporters. And also the women during the war, they bore a lot of trouble too with troops and nobody there to protect them. So a lot of the women went through a lot of great tribulation as well as the soldiers.
Sure, absolutely. Trying to raise a family and a crop with no men around, can you imagine?
I can only imagine. And then Union troops coming in and not burning your home, but I've read accounts where the women, they would take their guns and just fire up there and kill a woman and nothing be done about it. And there are accounts of that.
Duffy, address, if you would, about artillery. You know a little about it, I think. What was the great difference if you look at the Revolutionary War and then look at the Civil War? What technological change made the use of artillery so prevalent and powerful in the Civil War as opposed to the Revolution? They used slow oxen to pull these little old bitty cannons in the Revolution, and then 50 years, 60 years later, artillery is revolutionized.
I think there's two things. The first and obvious one that everyone knows about is the invention of rifling.
Yeah.
Robert Parker Parrott, first rifle cannon in North America. What's interesting, he develops that cannon, and U.S. Army's not interested in it. It can shoot 1.5 miles, so what? We're not interested in it. The only thing that kept him alive, he went to a little place called VMI, and there was a Mexican War artillery officer by the name of Thomas Jackson that was there. He saw this Parrott gun. Parrott brought a gun to VMI, put on this demonstration. Stonewall Jackson looks at that and says, "We got to have some." So he talks the state of Virginia into buying 6 Parrott rifles. This is in 1860. And that little bitty contract kept Parrott afloat. Of course, we all know the end of the story. He goes on to make 2,000 Parrott rifles. You talk about, I do a program on mass production, and people say, you know, could the South have won the war? And I always say no. Robert Parker Parrott, at his one foundry, outproduced the entire Confederacy. He made over 2,000 rifle cannon in less than 4 years. And he made 1.5 million projectiles. The South combined, 33 different foundries, including Tredegar, didn't make 2,000 cannon.
Yeah.
So rifle cannon. But the other side of that coin is horses. Revolutionary War, you're moving these things with oxen. Slow. A lot of them were dragged by men. There's a man, Samuel Ringgold, in the 1830s. He is the guy that really pushes horses. And if you've ever heard something called flying artillery or horse artillery, that's where all of the cannoneers are riding on a horse, and the horses themselves are pulling the carriages. Well, he goes to Washington because he's pushing to get horse artillery pushed through in the late 1830s, and he sets up a demonstration, and they're in Congress, and he has someone shoot a cannon. They start a stopwatch. He goes to the other side of Washington, which is a little over a mile, and they did it in less than 4 minutes and fired again. So he moved from one shot to the other shot in less than 4 minutes and showed Congress how efficient these horses were, and they voted the next week to cancel the horse program. But he did get his horses, used them in the Mexican War, and after the Mexican War, they really saw the effectiveness of mobile artillery. And that is the big difference, in my mind, is the mobility of the horses.
All right. Dr. Bennett, what about Bryce's Crossroads makes it so unique? I've read a lot about it, seen a lot about it. We studied it at West Point. It's just an amazing battle, and it's gotten its due in a lot of ways. In some ways it hasn't. But what made it so unique in American military annals?
Okay. Well, in some ways, I would say how Forrest was able to use the environment to his advantage. You got to remember, during this time, Grierson is out days before trying to find Forrest, and he'll stop at a farm and say, "You seen Forrest?" And they'd say, "Well, yeah." And he'd say, "Well, he's been through here lately." "Sure. How many men do you have?" "Oh, I think it was 10,000. And he'd believe him. And then he'd go down the road, and I've got this. I found all these different things where another one says 20,000, another is like 40,000, and he's really starting to wig out. And he tells Sturgis, but Sturgis kept his head and said, "No, he doesn't. Don't worry about that. He can't have anywhere near that. Just go down the road and run through them. You'll be fine." And you know what? Sturgis probably had a good point there, because at the beginning of that battle, when Grierson's thinking, well, he could have them because there's woods and everything, he didn't. And he probably could have just smashed right through them. But the other thing is, you've got to look at the undulation of the ground. A lot of times, historians, we get stuck in, here's the people here, and here's people there, and they shoot at each other, and they won, they lost, this guy got killed, and that. And we don't spend enough time looking at the environment. We don't look at the undulation of the ground. If you go out to, and this is true at Antietam, it's true at a lot of places. There's nothing different with Bryce's Crossroads terrain. It's just that here we had a general who looked at the situation and said, I am at a disadvantage. How do I make up for it? And he's got the woods, and he's got the ground, and he uses it to his advantage. And a lot of times, these officers, and historians just don't look at that. They don't see it that way. They just think we went out and we fought. But no, there's so much more to it. But yeah, I would say it's, how well he used the terrain. He had an uncanny knack, Forrest did this time, for how he thought this battle would go. And some people would say, well, yeah, that's kind of true and not. But when you look it up, you find that, Forrest said, well, it's going to be hot tomorrow. Well, it's June 10th. You expect it to be hot, right? But there'd been a lot of rain, so you never know. It could be raining again today, but it didn't. And he doesn't have control over the weather that I know of. But the thing is, here he's like, it's going to be hot. They're going to send up the cavalry first. They're going to leave these guys back. They're going to come up. By the time they get up here, they're going to be worn out, and half of them probably won't even be able to fight. And he was right. He was it's one of the few battles. Battle never goes the way you expect it, okay? But in this case, that is pretty darn close to calling it, because it happened a lot like he said. So that, to me, is really an interesting thing in the undulation of the terrain of the area as well.
There's another factor that we all, when we study battles of the Civil War, we can make a huge mistake. And of course, it's called the fog of war to some degree. And what that means is it's very easy to look at a map and say, oh yeah, well, this is what should happen, or this guy should have known that. But it's a whole different story when you're down there and you're being fed reports like McClellan was in the East, that the South outnumbered him, when in fact the South was outnumbered 2-1. But you don't know. You didn't have drones. You didn't have satellites. You didn't have helicopters. You didn't have any of the devices that we have now to determine the strength of an army. And even today, with all the stuff we have, it's still not a certain thing. You don't know because of camouflage and all that. When I was taking this course in military strategy and tactics our senior year, we had some of the cadets up there say, well, we were studying the Battle of Trenton during the Revolution, and these guys said, well, you can just look at the map and see what happens. And so the professor the next day had us go into separate classrooms, and he just fed us information. And you just had a map on the wall. You didn't know where the enemy was. That changes the whole deal. People that were so certain about what was happening no longer are certain when you don't know what's out in front of you. And that's the same thing that they had at Bryce's. It was, you go out to the field now and it looks like a football field. That's not the way it looked during the battle, right, Sark? It was cut over timber, and places you couldn't see from here to that wall. You knew the enemy was coming at you for one reason. All the rabbits and the deer started coming at you. If you were sitting in a Union infantry unit and all of a sudden, like at Shiloh, Gettysburg, and places, all the rabbits, squirrels, and deer start coming at you, guess what you know? Somebody's on the other side of that pushing them this way. So it's really interesting.
They did have telegraphing that could be helpful, but the other thing that was very interesting in 1862, the Peninsula Campaign, we did have hot air balloons that went up. Just so far, but they went up and could see area. They can't see everything. And then they would bring them back down, and they put them on the boats and shove, take them down further. And so that's where we get our first aircraft carriers. You think about it, that's the aircraft carrier. So.
Stark, I would like to ask you, and I want to open it up, of course, for questions too, but what happened by 1864 to the 11th Mississippi that had been so decimated up at Gettysburg?
11th Mississippi, ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how to build a clock, and you've hit on the right subject. 11th Mississippi goes to Sharpsburg, the last and fourth battle they fight in 1862. They start that year with 56 men fit and present for duty. By Sharpsburg, the fourth battle.
This is Company A.
Company A, University Grays. By the fourth battle, they're down to 20 men that go into the cornfield at Sharpsburg. bloodiest 40 acres in America, bloodiest day in American history. Those 20 young men who go into that battle, 19 are wounded, 3 do die of those wounds, so that's 95% casualty. Over the winter of 62, 63, after Sharpsburg, they do not fight at Fredericksburg, and they do miss, they're detached from the Army, and they do miss Chancellorsville. But over the winter of 62, 63, they build the company back up to about 33 men to go to Gettysburg with. Wounded come back. Almost every university grade that goes to Gettysburg has been wounded already 1, 2, 3 times. They go to Gettysburg, 33 of them. Jeremiah Gage is killed in the pre-charge cannonade, mortally wounded. James Daly is litter bearer that day, so he's non-combatant. We don't count him. So 31 University Grays go into the charge, 14 killed, 17 wounded, as Maudmar Brown showed, and I've backed up with 2 other sources. That is 100% casualties there at Gettysburg. After Gettysburg, there are never more than 15 of them together again. They are combined with Company F. In the very first battle of 64, after Gettysburg, they suffer, out of 15 of them present, they suffer 2 killed and 3 wounded, so they're down to 10 men. They end up on April 2nd at the last battle right below Petersburg with their backs to the swollen stream. And one of them there are probably 4 of them present. One swims the swollen stream, links back up with the Army of Northern Virginia and gets to Appomattox. The other 4 are captured. When I first went to Appomattox 25 plus years ago and I stood out there at Surrender Triangle, I cried for the 50 who were dead by then, and I thought about the 99 who never made it that far. 63 of them were, out of 150 total, 63 had been wounded anywhere from 1 to 6 times. 1 kid out of 150 University Grays gets to Appomattox. 1 gets to the end.
Yeah, I think the casualties in the 42nd, my great-great-grandfather was in the 42nd. I think at Appomattox there was a chaplain, 1 officer, and 2 men left at Appomattox.
The 11th lists 20-some-odd men and 1 horse. They captured a Confederate horse.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, any questions? Because we got about 5 minutes here. Oh, here you go.
My great-grandfather was listed as being shot or severely wounded, was the words they used, at the Okolona Prairie Mount campaign somewhere between the 20th and the 22nd. But the pages that are listed that they transcribed later, I think off of some microfilm, the Confederate State Army casualties list and narrative, because the wounding is in his service record, but then in that, the first initial of his name is incorrect. Is there any way, or where should I try and look, like at the National Archives, to find the original document that the person wrote that would have the correct initial, where later when it was transcribed, it was incorrect?
Jack, let me take this, since I do
Sure,
the casualty reports and everything all
Where
the
is
time. Maintain that. You can look at the National Archives and go in, and besides examining the microfiche, that you can request, go in and see the original paperwork, the signed documents. If you'll contact me through my page, Civil War North Mississippi, I'll try to pull some of that for you with your ancestor.
I have held the company muster rolls for the 11th Mississippi in my hands twice. There is material that was supposed to be lifted out of there and put onto the cards and put in the individual jackets. There's material in the muster roll books that is not in those jackets and on the cards. It's just not there. It didn't get transcribed.
I had a question about Sturgis, particularly about Bryce's Crossroads, about Sturgis moving the wagons east of the creek out there. And I'd like to know from you guys, what was Sturgis's mindset in your studies of this to allow that to move across? And did those wagons being on the east side contribute to the loss, or did they just amplify the destruction as the retreat started? Did it actually have anything to do with the loss bringing them across, or was it just something? I guess what I'm asking is how big of a mistake did Sturgis acknowledge that was, and how much did Forrest capitalize on that?
Wasn't Sturgis's fault. What happened was Sturgis was up on the crossroads, and the whole battle was coming together. The infantry were starting to show up. They're trying to get rid of the Union cavalry, get them out of the way, but so many of the infantry were coming up that were winded from the 2-mile, 3-mile run that they were having to do. And by the time they got to where they were supposed to be, they were just worn out. A lot of them couldn't even bite open the cartridge because they had no water. And so it's a bad situation. So you have infantry showing up, cavalry still there, some cavalry finally pulling out. And I believe it was something like, well, at least the wagons are still back toward Hatchie Bottom. They're still back there. We don't have to worry. Until an orderly comes in and says, hey, the wagons are here. Where do you want them? And that's when he's like, uh-oh. So he gets on his horse, I believe, at this point, and rides down the hill to where the wagons are coming up across the creek, okay? Now, what's interesting about this is he rides down, and you'll have some people right later, Union guys, saying, well, Sturgis left us when we needed him the most. I saw him riding away from the battle. I believe what they were seeing was Sturgis riding down the hill to go figure out what in the world's just happened. He gets down there, and he sees this whole situation. He says, you guys, get those wagons turned around and get them out of here. Get them back across the bridge. Well, where do we do that? Well, there's the field right there, okay? So they start to pull around through the field. But here's the problem. It's been raining for 6-7 days, and it's a field. So when you put a vehicle in a field, is it easy to get out? No, you've got mud everywhere. So all these different wagons are coming up, they're up to their axles, and they can't get out. And so you've got those guys trying to turn around to get out. You still had ones across the creek that are coming towards the battle. How do you get those turned around? And it's a cluster. It really does mess up. And so here he is trying to figure this out, tells them what to do, gets back up on top of the hill, and then you see all this push towards down the hill and then back out. And that's why a lot of those wagons were captured. And they tried to burn some of them, but that didn't happen too well because Forrest had his men to put those fires out. So in most cases, so that's what was happening there. From my studies of it, Sturgis goes down there. It's just a bad situation. He did not expect them to come up when they did. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
All right, we got the last question here. Get everyone out of here, but I want to let's go down. Let's just start with you, Stark. Anything you guys are working on? Any programs you might have coming up that you want to talk about? Any articles? Any books? Anything at all? Any speaking engagements? Go ahead and just start down the line. Thank you.
It's tour season again. I've got tours up on my Facebook page, Miller Civil War Tours, along with 400 true stories. One of my 2 editors is sitting right here to get my first book done. He brought the edited parts to the car with him. I've got them now. And I joked with him, I got to quit goofing off. I got to go to work now.
One of the things that I'm really excited about is the April 13th program at Raymond. One of the things that we get a chance to do is we're going to fire a 24-pound field howitzer that day, and it's the first time since May of '63 that one has been fired there. And we're actually going to auction off the privilege so somebody can have bragging rights. And what we're really doing, we've been following an Illinois battery, a McAllister's battery that was at Shiloh with these 4 24-pounders. The only battery in the Union Army that had 4 24-pounders, but they came into Mississippi. They were at Jackson, Champion Hill, Vicksburg, Raymond. They were all over the state, but on the 13th of April, we're going to fire a 24-pound field howitzer again for the first time in 160-some years.
On June 7th, 8th, and 9th, I believe if this is still on, Bryce's Crossroads is having the reenactment of the battle real close to the anniversary. And if any of y'all want to come out and see it, we'll be there, I'll be there, several thousand reenactors, artillery will be there, and we encourage the public to come out and enjoy what a Civil War battle would have looked like on Bryce's Crossroads on the battlefield. If y'all can come, y'all come on.
That's rare, by the way.
At the moment, I'm looking at a 3-volume study where I'm going to list every name of every horse on the Union and Confederate side. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No. I'm working and have been working on the Battle of Atlanta, July 22nd, 1864. You'll see that there have been Eichelbarger wrote one a while back. Very good work Gary Eichelbarger did on Atlanta. And then also you have Hess, who has written one on it just lately. I've been working on this. This was my dissertation back in 2009. I've shelved it. You know, the kids get grown up. Now it's time to get it finished. So I'm working on that right now to finish up the Battle of Atlanta, looking at a few other things. I'm also teaching a class on the Battle of Shiloh. That's a 3-week online course. And then one day we go out to the battlefield, and that'll be this summer. And just trying to keep things together with classes and administration and all those kinds of things.
I'd like to encourage you to keep working on that 3-volume set of all the horses, though.
No.
One of the things when he said that, I got excited. I thought, I do a program on horses, mules, and harness, and I start out with telling people something. They sometimes have a hard time believing this. 1.5 million horses and mules died during that war. That's twice as many as people. They made a huge contribution in the war, so don't give up on that 3-volume set.
We want to thank everyone for coming. Give them a round of applause. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming. I hope you will spread the word about the Bryce's Crossroads Foundation and Roundtable and will participate. I think you kind of see the quality of the program that we hope to have in this organization, and we invite all of you and spread the word, and we wouldn't turn down contributions.
Absolutely not. Me and Michael Dempsey over here at the foundation will stick around as long as anyone wants to talk to us. So thank you for coming, everyone.